Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ROC at Home by HSMAI. I hope you are enjoying this season. There's different videos. I think there's great content that is being brought to you in this ROC at Home this year. My name is Heidi, and I will be taking you through the session on forecasting. So, who am I? Like I mentioned, my name is Heidi. I need to learn how to work this presentation. I run a small consultancy here in Singapore, and my background is revenue management. I've done revenue management for more decades than I'd like to admit. And I've had my own company for the last 10 years. And we work with outsourced solution. We provide outsourced solution for smaller independent hotels. We provide outsourced solution for mega brands, franchise owners, and we assist with some of the strategic advice on revenue management. So that's what I do. That is hopefully what will qualify me to speak to you on this topic about forecasting today. And I'm still trying to work out how this presentation works. Okay, so what should you expect from this presentation? About 30-35 minutes of me presenting to you. And the questions we have had come in, I will try and answer. If I do not speak to a particular question that you may have in mind, I would encourage you to just reach out either to Jackie, to HSMAI, to me directly. There will be an email address at the end, and I'm more than happy to help you or to discuss that with you, because most of those questions are discussions rather than just very simple, straightforward questions. What I will be presenting to you is my point of view on forecasting in this current season, and hopefully a few practical steps that you can apply in this. So, forecasting in the age of the crystal ball. It's been tough for all of us. It's been tough for the whole world. And so what I'd like to do today is really speak to that a little bit and hope bring some clarity to you and some direction how you can keep forecasting successful. Before we do that, I'd like to establish some common language so that if I speak about a forecast, you know what I am talking about, and we do not miscommunicate in that regard. So, what is a forecast? In its simplest form, forecast is the prediction of future behavior and future results, and we generally base these predictions on historical behavior, on patterns with similar parameters. So there could be special events, there could be seasons in our business, in our destinations, and hopefully data. There's an awful lot of gut feel still existent in our forecasting techniques, but hopefully you have the opportunity and the ability to base your forecast on data. The next questions we need to answer before we go any further is actually establish a bit of a baseline with regards to why do we do forecasts? What do we need them for? Why bother? So I have broken those down in two major categories. One is from a marketing or strategy point of view, and the other one is from an operational point of view. So let's get right into the marketing one. So why do I think we should be doing, or why do I know we do forecasts? Number one, it is to really understand the demand for our market segment. So we have all, if you've got more than one client, you have market segmentation. I know probably in your systems you have something configured in market segmentation. And really what you're trying to do in your forecast is to forecast according to those segments. So you're trying to predict how many more people will be coming from those particulars. Next one is to set price differentiation. So that's the job of a revenue manager, which client is willing to pay what for a room product or a rate product that is essentially the same for each one of them, but some of them have different preferences for others. So that is the job of a revenue manager. And then thirdly, to really optimize the whole revenue, the performance of the hotel. Optimize rate and occupancy to get maximum results. Very straightforward. That's why we do a forecast, and that's why you and I have a job. So, but also from an operational point of view, it is quite important that we do a forecast. Operations is relying on our forecast when it comes to their planning process, their resource planning process, making sure that we have enough staff in the hotel in the right places. It also helps with the service delivery. So if we have special arrangements, huge banquets to prepare for, so that procurement can get the necessary supplies to deliver on time. And then thirdly, certainly not the least of any of those reasons is for the business operator, for the business owner, is on financial cash flow. So that is a huge part to project, do we have enough cash flow to keep the business afloat, to meet our obligations, to pay our salaries, and also to pay our suppliers. So for cash flow purposes, your forecast is hugely important. So now we've established that for this discussion. So the next question then will become, should we actually still do a forecast in this current climate? I have had clients that tell me, you know what, don't bother, I don't need a forecast any longer because you might as well give me a blank sheet of paper, it is useless. I have an opinion on this, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this session. And my answer to this question, should you still do a forecast in this current season, is an absolute resounding yes. Yes, please do not stop forecasting. We need to continue to forecast because we need that visibility. Although you may be staring at a very foggy landscape right now, keep staring, keep going at it. Don't give up. We need that visibility. Your business needs that visibility. And they need it because the rest of the operation or the rest of the organization can learn and adapt to the changing trends that you, as a revenue manager, by nature, you would see that first. So we need to understand those changing trends. We need to understand what's happening in the marketplace, particularly in this current season. You need to keep forecasting so that you are ready to respond as and when business comes back. And it may come back in a very different form than it has done in the past, which is, as we go through that presentation, I share some of those areas with you so that you're ready to respond. It's really another good reason. And then lastly, again, it is a plain business necessity. Your owners need to know, your management companies, they need to know what is your outlook. How do you consider the future to develop for you in your current situation? So please do not stop forecasting. You may want to change it. It may not be the same. And this is what part of why we go through this forecast, through this presentation, because maybe the things that you should look for have changed. And so keep forecasting, but let's have a look at some of these new considerations that are possibly outside your current practice when you prepare your forecast. So I've got 2 slides on that one. One is very much internal, so it's very much things that you can control, things that you have access to. And one is external, so a little more on a macro level. So the first one is your leisure versus business travel. And we're seeing this again from the little first green shoots of recovery that we're seeing across the world. It is very unusual what we're seeing at this moment in time, as leisure travel is recovering before business travel, at least in the immediate booking window. And that has to do with friends and family wanting to reconnect, people traveling to see their family, going back home to visit them. And after being cooped up in the house for many months, they just want to go and have a little bit of a break or go on a staycation or a short holiday. So leisure travel has come back in these areas before business travel. Business travelers aren't allowed to travel, or it is very restricted. Not something that is normal. And this is from a as you plan for your recovery, that's something you should prepare for. So instead of maybe your first engagement being with your corporate and your business travelers, start engaging your leisure travelers first. Start looking at your vacation packages and your price points first. So that's the first one I would encourage you to consider. Historical data. Now that might sound a little bit as that I'm contradicting myself, because right now historical data is quite useless to predict the future, and that is still true. That does not change. But what historical data does tell you, it provides a baseline. It'll create a plumb line which you can use to start measuring something against. So it is still quite important with regards to understanding how your hotel may have operated in the past. It is absolutely useless right now to predict the future. but what you can do, you can use it as a baseline, and from there on out, you can measure the performance either in one way or the other. So understand your historical data. An example for this would be, if you know in 2019, 65% of your business was from your domestic or from your domestic market, so from the country that you are based in, and 65% of your travelers came from the very country you operate in, and 35% came from countries outside or different countries. So that alone will tell you an awful lot about your next budgeting season, about your next planning season, because in your next planning season, it won't be to 65% that will come from your domestic market. It will be 85, 90, or even higher a percentage point of your business will be from the country that you come from because of the restrictions. So that alone will tell you with regards to the absolute numbers that you need to generate in order to get your occupancies to a particular level. So this is one example that you can use historical data for, and where it is really important that you understand, that you know your historical. Non-traditional distribution is our next point on this one. This current situation will bring about a very different marketplace. It is too early to actually tell what it will be, but it's a very exciting moment actually for us as an industry to see what are some of these non-traditional distribution platforms that we're beginning to see emerge or just come into play for us. I'm sure all of you have been receiving questions from these voucher platforms or bulk buying options, things that a few years ago or even a few months ago is not something we would have ever considered for our business model. But these non-traditional platforms, even in the short term, they could help you build some additional occupancies. They could help you generate some additional revenues. So in your respective markets, have a look. What are some of these non-traditional distribution channels that we could start partnering? Repeat versus new guests. I think this one is almost like flogging a dead horse, but I do want to speak to this because I don't know a lot of revenue managers that actually do extensive analysis on the behavior of loyal guests. Usually that is done by marketing, and they do a lot around the behavior of the repeat guests from a corporate point of view. But on a property level, we don't spend an awful lot of time thinking about why did, for example, a guest come last year for and have their anniversary with us, and how can we help him come back, and how can we help him make another reservation with us. The threshold for loyal guests is much lower than for new guests. Loyal guests, they know your environment, hopefully they had a great experience with you, and they can see how maybe the safety measures and the cleanliness standards that you're implementing, they would feel comfortable to come back and enjoy another stay with you during that time. So this is another one where you can go back to historical data to help you understand, reach out to a certain kind of guest that may want to come back and have another good experience. It'll be a lot less costly for you to do that than to go out and look for new guests. Another interesting analysis, I think, would be to actually look at the amount of guests you had in-house in 2019 and how much money did you spend in creating new guests that have come for the first time, and what was the effort that you have spent to trying to convert people that have come the second time. So what is our effort from a marketing strategy point of view, trying to convert people to come back versus creating new guests? So it's an interesting approach, and I think it could make a difference, and it may be an opportunity for us to. Other revenue versus rooms revenue. I think most hotels, most of you that are on this webinar, not something you're unfamiliar with. Food delivery obviously is an option. Catering is an option. Even retail. Some of the hotels have branched out into retail. So what are some of these non-traditional revenues or other revenues that we can work with how can we create value? How can we redefine our hospitality space where people not necessarily have to stay with us to experience hospitality our way? So I think that is a question that we as an industry should answer, and we should look at it. So have a look in your local marketplaces. What is being done? What are the options that you have available to do this? And I think you may find a few opportunities that you could consider together. Which will then lead me to this last point on this first slide about strategy and product changes. So all of these things may cause you to relook your market segmentation. We've got another great session on this out of ROC at home this year, so do go and check it out. If you feel there's something you want to explore a little bit more, it may cause you on room type changes. Another webinar in this what are some of the strategy changes, the product changes, and that includes rate products, that includes the different fencings that we've got at the moment, or not, because I know many of us have removed any form of rate fencing at this moment in time. But what are some of the changes that this may cause? Now, what I do want to point out before I actually move on any further is that none of these activities are done by one person, by the revenue manager, the director of revenue in the property. None of these activities. He can be the one to initiate it. He can be the one who maybe facilitates the discussion. But more than ever, I think we have to learn as an industry to work as revenue teams in our property. We need to engage with the marketing team, the sales team, the operational team, obviously our general manager, and just look at our business with a new set of lenses. And that is really what we want to talk about, during this ROC season, ROC at home this year, because it is so different to what we used to have. So it's a team sport, always. Okay, what are some of the macroeconomic I mentioned earlier? The second lot would be macroeconomic components or considerations you can look at. So I think many times with our independent partners, it's very difficult to translate macroeconomic issues into our own little environment, into our own environment. How does something that is happening up here affect my business down here? And how do I translate this into a forecast? So first up is the things I think we should start considering: domestic versus international or regional travel. We mentioned it before. It is domestic travel that will probably come back first, and within the domestic travel, it's probably the one with driving distance, where you can drive in your own car before you can see any return of the train or train travel, people that travel by train, or people that fly. So within that, your domestic markets will return first. So have a look at your area and what is relevant to you. The next one that you should consider is other countries. Other countries that are already seeing some development, that are already seeing a little bit of an uptick, where maybe they have already passed that critical stage in their COVID life cycle, and how we're seeing some signs of recovery. And be aware of them. Make sure you read your newspapers more than ever. Make sure you stay abreast with what's happening and the policy changes that these countries make and the impact those policy changes have on travel. Another one is, again, quite obvious, is stay informed with your local government, the restrictions that they are creating, and the plans that they have in place. What are the different phases that they're planning out, and where on this timeline are you currently? Where do you expect this? When do you expect changes to happen from a governance point of view and legislative point of view? So consider that, and also consider this one relative to other countries. So when they have crossed that threshold, what happened to their travel? It will help you to get an understanding with regards to when you, as a city or as a county, as a country, when you can see change happening for you. Lastly, I have here the trends outside of hospitality. Not every industry is doing badly. The healthcare industry is doing really well. The hospitals are doing really well. Even work from home has caused a lot of the computer companies or companies that produce monitors or office equipment it has been a very good ride for them because people needed to equip their offices. So not every industry is doing badly. Consider in your environment, how would that affect some of your corporate clients, and what impact does that have on your local economy? So have a look at some of those macroeconomic issues and see how that would affect your local business. Now, what I do want to look at next is I've actually taken some publicly available data. Some of them are from some of the sponsors or the sponsor of this particular session, Forward Keys. But the other ones are all publicly available, so you can have a look at that yourself. And I just want to show you how this has an impact on how you can translate this into. So this particular provider, they're providing the booking volumes. On this graph, you can see what it was before COVID has started to happen. And I've picked a couple of countries based on our audience and hopefully some of the regions of the world that are relevant. For this you may find this relevant. So you can see how until the February 24th, very little had changed. There were two countries that had already responded. One is Singapore, the other one is Vietnam. But all the others, they were still tracking good. Now, these are reservations coming through the pipeline and the occupancy levels, right? So basically, when did it all start to fall off? Was really from the early March until the second and third week of March. This is when the decline really happened across the world. And then when we go into April 6th, about 6 weeks, even as early as end of March, all the way until early May, for about 5 to 6 weeks, there was literally no booking volumes anywhere. And then we had some countries who made changes. So this one is New Zealand. They lifted their restrictions on the 9th of May or 19th, something like that, 12th or 15th of May, something like that. And immediately you could see the booking volumes go up. Now they lead the pack at the moment from the countries that I have chosen. This one is the United States. I think this one, I can't see at the bottom, this one is Australia, and this one is the global average. Right down here we have Singapore. Singapore, we still have a lot of restrictions in place. We don't allow international travelers to come in. We're a very small country, so we have very little domestic travel happening. So it's really still quite flat. But the one that was also really quite immediate is this one, and that's Malaysia. Malaysia lifted their restrictions quite significantly early June. And within a week, I took this picture on Monday, this is now 4 days ago, immediately the demand of business has picked up. So this one will tell you when you see a particular country make a decision, what is the implication? Now the presentation has already jumped onto this slide. This is another example of data that you have access to. You can look up for your particular country. So this one is coming from another partner here. So this one is specifically for Australia. So they have done these sort of studies where it will tell you that the tourism spend for Australia for 2019, that more than 3/4 was actually spent by Australians in Australia. And within that, you've got the majority of that is intrastate. So these are actually people in the same state traveling to stay and spending tourism. So these are people on holiday or on leisure time, spending money. So if I'm a hotel in Australia, this information is very useful to me because I know for next year there won't be this portion of international travel. It's not going to happen. But it doesn't necessarily matter so much because I know that a lot of my business is coming domestically. And so my marketing efforts, my strategy efforts, I don't need to try and waste money outside of Australia. I will just go after this. So these are some of the decisions or some of the discussion points that you can have as you go into your forecast and your budget season. This one is from our partner at Forward Keys. the data they have provided. And there's another example about 2019 data, how you can use historical data to help you interpret what's happening in the future. It won't predict it, but it will help, it will serve as a baseline from where you can see if something changes, that it's different to what it used to be for that particular country. So out of this, this is the average lead time of travel for Asia. So the ones with the longest booking window, so almost 120 days is up. So they were already, so their travel window in a good season like 2019, their lead time was 90 days when they booked. Sorry, 120 days when they booked. Now, in a season like this, if you get bookings from Korea, should you expect it for next month? Should you start looking, because Korea is a market that can develop? Is that something that we can expect for next month? Even in a good season, they have 3 months lead time. But now maybe is the time to talk to South Korea about bookings for Q1 2021 or late Q4 2020. So this is something where you can again go after your particular markets, where you can say, okay, Koreans, they do make this sort of decision. So this is something to consider, right? I just want to go back to, I'm trying to address how we can interpret historical data and plan for it, knowing that this is how a market behaves. So it helps us plan going forward. It will not help us predict our performance. Let me just be clear. This one are average lead times into Latin America for last year. And how many days in advance they make their travel arrangements. Again, it will help you in your planning process when you go after your key countries over time. It will show you give you a good indication what is the average lead time. So you know that if you work with the UK, you don't need to expect for Latin America a return over the next 30 days. It will take longer. This is an example of data points, again by forward keys, that shows you when there was a change in policy. This is all this year. When there was a change in policy, how the travel demand has picked up. Again, if you know your source countries and you understand a little bit how they travel, this is Spain, Greece, and Portugal, what were the changes and how quickly did people respond to that? So all of that is available to you and you can make really good use of that. This one is where they actually broke down the data for Portugal. So this data for Portugal is broken down here. This is the amount of pure leisure travel, and this is the amount that were actually expats in VFR, so visiting friends and relatives. So people that wanted to go back to see their families, go back home or travel. So this one was 93% of the 2019 levels. So there was a lot of people returning to their respective families. Now, when you return to your home country, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to stay in a hotel. Because at your home, you may have a place, but you may be able to create some packages, some really nice things for those families as they reunite and celebrate, and just have a good time as a family after this many months of separation. Maybe it's something we can do and provide for these returning families, come away for a few days on a staycation as a family, for example. Point being, you can use those things to help you build your strategy. This one is just a very brief overview on the travel pattern of China. So the blue one is 2019. Orange, this was Chinese New Year in February, January. And then it plummeted. This is when the recovery of the economy was reported to start happening. And ever since then, we've seen a steady uptake on the domestic travel. So we're at about a 50% level now of 2019. This one was before the stuff of what's happening right now in Beijing is happening. But it is recovering. Okay, so now that we looked at all of these different data points, and this is just a small selection, what should you actually do? So now I want to get really, really practical. So what should you do? How can you forecast? It is no point doing one forecast a week, by segment, by month, by day, if you and not plan for it properly, because I'm telling you, whatever forecast you do right now, it will be incorrect. So my recommendation is, and this is what we do with our clients, is that you build multiple models. So you come up with a model that has assumptions, and you record these assumptions, and you have to be very specific about the assumptions. You do your research just like what we did on these macroeconomic levels. You understand your historical makeup of your hotel, and you can say, based on this, if this and this happens, I'm expecting this. So you build multiple ones. I'll show you in a moment how or what they could look like. You record it, very important. I know sometimes revenue managers, we are not very diligent with our revenue meeting minutes and the decisions that were actually made and the follow through required. So, but in this season, I must stress this is critically important. You need to record your assumptions. You need to record what you base your decisions on. And then you need to monitor. So you go back and you revisit it, not maybe daily, but when you know a major shift is happening, some legislation is changing, some laws are changing, some restrictions are being lifted or extended, what are the implications? So what could that look like? So you can work with 2, 3, or 4 models. I've done all of those depending on the client we're engaging with. But so you use your last year as a baseline level, and you can go as detailed as you want to. You can do this by revenue, by occupancy, every average room rate, by segment, whatever level you want to go to, right? I just used a very simple example. And you come up with, okay, what's realistic? So realistically, my assumption is right now that domestic travel will be returning, and there is demand on weekends. So therefore, my forecast in June is about, based on my occupancy, based on my amount of rooms, I think I can go to about 12% occupancy. And that's my assumption. This is obviously way too short. You need a little more than that, right? But so then you can say in July is still soft, but and so on. So you build out your expectation for your realistic forecast, because this should be the trajectory to conservative. So if we're a little more conservative than the realistic one, and we assume that we actually close the hotel in June because there's just not enough demand. So we'll keep it closed. And we've got very soft demand in July due to travel restrictions and school holidays and whatever is relevant for your destination. So you build your model around that. And then you maybe come up with a worst case scenario where you say, you know what, I think the hotel is going to close for 2 months or 2 more months if you've had already a few months of closure. And the recovery is really slow and it will take time. Based on this, then you can do your revenue projections, and this will become a good document for your ownership, for your management companies to gauge what is your current position. And that is really the point of that whole presentation. You need to arrive at a point of view. Once you evaluated all these different aspects, what is the point of view? You as a team, remember it's not just one person, you as a team arrive and saying, this is our assumption at this moment. And then you keep adjusting from there on out. So this is a little bit on a forecast scenario. So go as deep as you'd like, or just keep it on a revenue level. It's entirely up to you, as long as you can substantiate it and you can. And now I'd like to talk a little bit to hotels that either had to close, have to close, and eventually, hopefully, they will reopen. So how do you make a decision? I've got lots of discussions around this with my owners and our partners at this moment in time. How do you make a decision when to close? What is the, other than the immediate, occupancy, and I mean, there's so many things that are involved in that decision and very far-reaching decisions. So reopening hotels. I don't want to talk about closing hotels. I hope we're past this. When do you also make the decision to reopen a hotel? So I've got 4 points on this one. Again, it's very cursory at the moment. We only have a few minutes to talk about this, but things you need to consider very easily. It's number 1 is cash flow. Number 2 is your strategy, your ramp up, your opening strategy, your resourcing, and your marketing. So cash flow, you have to have a very difficult, I guess, heart-to-heart conversation with your ownership, with your management. on how long can we actually afford to operate cash flow negative. Because like in any opening scenario, when you reopen a hotel, it will be cash flow negative. So you have to be aware of this, and you need to know, when do I need to break even? Because that one may determine when you reopen. It may determine that you say, you know what, I'm not going to reopen the hotel for another 6 months until I have enough demand so that my cash flow negative season period is shorter than if I reopen earlier. So have that discussion with your ownership. Ramp up. Ramp up has two components for me. One is the ramp up of the strategy. So between you deciding to reopen and the actual reopening, what is the time window? Talk to your team, work with your operational team, and have a plan. How long does it take you from going to let's open the hotel to we're opening, we're open, we're operating, so that you understand what is the time window. It's huge planning issues and things like that. This actually also covers the resourcing point here, because you need to plan your resources. That is your suppliers, that is your manning. If you had to let people go on furlough, if you had to let people go, and I know a lot of our companies are in a situation like that. If you had to let people go, how long will it take for you to bring people back, to onboard them if they're new people, to train them, and so on? So you need to take that into account in your process. And lastly, but certainly not the least, is the marketing around that. When you reopen the hotel, or as you're planning to do this, have your plans ready. Have your pre-opening team in place, if you like if you were to open a hotel. Have your rate offers in place, have your distribution in place, have maybe special opening partnerships in place. These are all very important points that you should consider as you start to reopen. Now, and this is my actual last slide now, I want to be very practical. So I hope with the steps that we just discussed, you can significantly reduce the size of your crystal ball. I'd prefer it if you can crash it all together. If you do work around the points we talked about, I think you will develop the ability to have enough foresight to make some critical decisions. So about practical steps, what should we be doing? Number one, you have to build some forecast scenarios. So go through, similar to what you just saw, very simple. What are your 3 or 4 cases, different assumptions, and translate those into numbers, and go into as much detail as you can with your assumptions for each scenario. Next one, very important, be responsive to the increased frequency of change. We're not gonna go back to what it was. It won't go back to that. So we have to adapt, we have to pivot, we have to relearn a few things. So this one is a challenge for teams. It's not just a challenge for an individual, it's a challenge for a team. So you have to really learn as a team to rely on each other differently, and use different sources of information to end up at an opinion. And so you can form an opinion together as a team. Number 3, keep open communication channels with your senior management. Very important. Know the business situation. Understand what's this cash flow situation is business critical. And a lot of our hotels are fighting for survival at this moment in time. So keep as open a communication channel as possible, and see how you can assist, because yes, the alternative distribution channels may not be the ones that generate 50% occupancy, but they may just help you enough to make sure you can make payroll next month. Number 4, engage with your marketing teams on demand creation. Be intentional about it. Believe that you can work with your teams in a new way. So truly, if you're a revenue manager and you don't already sit in the marketing office, plant yourself into the marketing office and hear what's going on, so that you understand from a marketing point of view how these choices that they're making is impacting your forecasting, and it's impacting the demand that you see come through the door and you measure. So really start engaging with them a lot more, maybe even than you've done in the past. And lastly, certainly again not the least, is increase your frequency of engagement. build a rapport with your channel partners beyond just performance, but just check in regularly, see how they're doing, check their back-end analytics, what they are seeing, travel trends that they're seeing, check in with your local airline, with your local train station, or even your local governments. Have somebody work out a liaison with your tourism board or with your government legislator, so that you can have updated information quickly, and you have direct access. And so I think if you go through these points, if you follow some of these steps, I know they've worked for us. It will give you visibility. It will give you better visibility. It may not make the decisions much easier, and it may not talk to you about 50% occupancy or 85% occupancy break evens, but it will help you understand the future of your business and how you will be impacted by it. So with that, I think there were a couple of questions that we had during the live session around the need to forecast by day. Do I need to do a forecast by day in multiple scenarios? My answer to that is that you should consider your trend. Maybe look at, if you're a leisure destination, consider what's happening on your weekends. You may want to consider occupancy by weekend versus midweek, if to that level of detail. Or if you have specific events, or if you monitor your on the books situation, you will see days that are standing out where you can see your pickup coming. But overall, in your scenarios, just have a look at what would you assume. If my assumption is built around weekend travel, then of course I have to take the occupancy on weekends. If it is on weak corporate demand, but okay leisure demand, and I'm in a school holiday season, then maybe I have to take that into account, that particular weekend. So if you have some citywide events that may still be happening, like in some places, Formula One is not cancelled here in Singapore, it's cancelled now, it has an impact on the performance of the hotel for that particular month. So I think that would address that particular issue. Now, if you have any other questions that you feel that you would like to ask, please feel free to reach out to myself. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the website. You can reach us. Also, if you would like, our partner from Forward Keys, they have made this white paper available to us. If you'd like to refer to that, please, there's the link right down here below.